This is the Advisor Library, where serious advisors, operators, and leaders sharpen their thinking. A community built around a simple idea. Books shape who we become and the firms we build. Each episode, host Matt Cosgriff sits down with an advisor, operator, or leader in wealth management to talk about the books and ideas that shaped how they think, lead, and serve. Books change leaders. Leaders change firms.
Thomas Pargett, welcome to the Advisor Library podcast. It's awesome to have you here, and happy Friday.
Thank you very much. Glad that you invited me. It's an honor to be here. This will be really fun.
Awesome. So first off, super excited to have you on. Thomas, you've become a great friend over the years. I think sort of funny enough, you'll probably be my only guest that I hired by slipping into your LinkedIn direct messages, I think 5 or 6 years ago, but we'll save that story for another day. But you are somebody that has just an immense energy and curiosity and zest for life. And so just super excited to have you on. One of the things I know you and I have bonded over and kind of connected over the years is our love for reading, and I think always getting better and learning. And so excited to dive into some of the books that have shaped who you are as an advisor and a leader and ultimately as a person.
Thank you. This is going to be a really good podcast. Honor to be here. So this will be really fun.
Cool. Well, I'll frame up this will be one of the first episodes, just frame up the concept of the podcast briefly, and then I want to jump into your career. You know, as I think back on my career thus far, one of the things that's stuck with me is that there's been different inflection points in my career. And oftentimes there's a book that I've read around that period of time that's sort of informed my growth, right, as a leader and as a person, as an advisor. And I find that sort of thread tends to be true for a lot of people. I know that's true in your case as well. And then in addition to that, there's no shortage of information coming at us today, whether it's the news or X or LinkedIn or whatever it might be. But I find the best insights tend to be in books. They tend to be more durable. And so there's a couple books I know you have a big passion for that I'm excited to jump in with you here today. But before we do that, would love to just have you maybe give a little background on your career. I think you've got a really interesting story having started as a teacher, and I won't steal any more thunder, but how did you go from teacher to here today?
Happy to go through that. The short of it is I graduated in 2008 from a small school in the very, very top northwest corner of Iowa, Sioux City, Iowa, called Morningside University. I was fresh out of school with a degree in elementary education. I come from a family of educators, so it was a very natural path for me. My fiance at the time, now wife, got into graduate school at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. So we moved to Lincoln, and I immediately got a job as a teacher in the Lincoln Public School District as a 4th grade classroom teacher. I taught 4th grade for 4 years, and I actually knew early in my career that I was not meant to be a classroom teacher forever. I felt that. Mm-hmm. But the theme around it is I love to teach and I love to educate. I just didn't love being a classroom teacher. And so our first daughter was born in 2012. And after she was born, that was kind of my catapult into finding the next step for me. It was time that I found something. I did some exploration, and I ultimately met with a mentor of mine who was in wealth management who said, "You'd be a great advisor." Why is that? And he said, the best advisors are the best teachers. And he said, you'd have to be willing to learn the language. And I had done enough personal financial planning on my own. I thought, I think that would be really interesting. And I think I would be good at that. And so ultimately I made that transition in 2012, 2013. And transitioned into wealth management at that time. And many, many paths later, many, many miles later, here we are. But I ended up going to graduate school at Creighton University, earning an MBA, getting my CFP, and really studying ultimately what has really led us here is that of financial psychology. And that's been a big, big piece of what I've done and studied. And that's been a big piece of what I've read about too for the past couple of years and what I've studied and what's important to me and what's important to my clients. And here we are.
It's funny you say that the best advisors make the best teachers. I'm a huge believer in that. I think you and I have worked with other folks too that were teachers and I think are incredible advisors, and you are certainly in that category as well. And so it's cool that your mentor really saw that as an opportunity for you, because it's not something that maybe naturally just sort of comes to mind when you're a teacher and it's like, oh, you should be an advisor. But I think, again, it's such an important piece. What maybe most surprised you about that transition? I mean, I think you mentioned that you did a little bit of personal finance before and you had sort of at least an outsider's view of things, but were there any big things that surprised you in kind of jumping into a different career path?
So the biggest thing that surprised me about this was the fact that there is so little finance involved, really. Mm-hmm. It is an enormous amount of education. an enormous amount of psychology. The tests that you are required to go through and the licenses that you're required to get are all basically all math tests for the most part. But when you're meeting with clients, there is certainly some math involved and some finance involved. But gosh, such an enormous percentage of what we do is educating, is psychology, is listening, is presenting information to them to make clients feel comfortable. I don't pull out my calculator during meetings. I've never once calculated a Sharpe ratio for a client in a meeting, right? None of that has ever happened. I've never written an option for a client, even though that's what you get tested on earlier in your career is option contracts. So that actually really surprised me. And therein lies the wisdom of that advice that I did get early was the best advisors are the best teachers, because you really do have to teach and explain and make complicated concepts simple for clients to understand. If you can do that and you can earn their trust and ensure that they understand what you're saying, then you end up becoming a good advisor and they trust you and away you go.
As I was mentioning earlier, there's no doubt that there's been probably books that have helped shape, who you are as an advisor. And I think to your point, like the CFP does a great job in the sense of you learn a lot of the technical aptitudes needed to be an advisor, but it's very short. I think we would all probably agree in terms of just a lot of the EQ skills, the ability to listen and empathize. And so before we get in maybe to some of the specific books, I'd love to just maybe start right at the top. Why does Thomas Pargett read?
So this actually started when I was a teacher. I've read my whole life, but I really, as an adult and as a professional, really got into reading even more when I was an educator, because it was something with my students. It was really important for me to ensure that they were reading often. And so one of the ways that we would ensure that these students read often is you model reading. So we would have certain reading time and I would read as well, and we would model reading. There's a children's author named Gary Paulsen, Paulsen. He's an incredible children's author, young adult, young teen. He had a quote that I had in my classroom every year that I taught, and it was, every child should read like a wolf eats. And wolves are ravenous eaters, right? They will eat. The second they get their hands on food or meat, they will eat until it's gone. And it was his philosophy that every child should read that way. And ultimately, I felt as though everybody should read that way. And that was kind of what I modeled for the students. And then you carry that on as you make a career transition. There's a lot of reading to do. There's a lot of studying to do. You have to learn the language, as I had noted earlier. And so the way to learn the language is to read about it and to engross yourself in it and total immersion. And so I began reading finance books and business books. And I just immersed myself fully in reading to learn and get better and to be an advisor and to be a good advisor, and would surround myself with any information that I thought would help, especially as I made the career transition. Then to piggyback on that, one thing I noticed about just my life in general, whenever I'm actively reading, everything in my life seems to be going a little better. If I take a step away from reading for whatever reason, I notice that things in my life don't necessarily go bad, but they're just not as smooth. Like everything in my life seems to improve or go well the more I'm reading. And so I noticed that about myself a long time ago, and I've just done everything I can to stay actively engaged with as many books and as many topics as I can.
So I want to double click on that for just a second. I'd love to hear your sort of hypothesis. Like, why is that? Why does sort of life slow down or become better in some capacity when you're reading? I tend to agree. I don't know that I personally could put a finger on why, but I would love to just hear if you have any thoughts on why that is.
I think personally for me, it means that I'm learning. It means that I'm improving somewhat. To read, you have to be very present to read.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that too. The more I read, the more present I am when I read. And therefore that presence seems to carry on into other aspects of my life, which I think, as we all know, the more present you are, the better you are. If you lose yourself in a really good story, that's less time that you're scrolling on your phone. That's less time that you're watching news that does nothing but make you anxious. I think you avoid all those anxieties and all those distractions when you're reading. At least that's what I've gathered from it. That's what I feel is important.
Yeah, I find doom scrolling tends to be energy draining, right? You sort of get the dopamine hit. But conversely, when you're reading a book, and it sounds like you feel this way too, like that actually can be really energy inducing. Like you sort of feel energized, right? You're sort of thinking and The other things I'm so curious about just in general, and I would love to get your thoughts on is, certainly there's fewer books than there are the endless stream of articles on X and LinkedIn and whatnot, but there's still a lot of books out there. And there's no Netflix algorithm, so to speak, that just sort of tells you like, hey, here, this is what you should read. And so one of the things I'm fascinated by is like, how do people decide what to read? And so I'd just be curious how you think about that. And then particularly in light of that career change, because I'm sure that was a part of getting up to speed in some capacity and still is today, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to counter myself here. I find most of what I read off of social media. So, I mean, yeah.
Whatever works, right?
Right. As much as I hate to say that I don't scroll, and I do end up scrolling, but I do get a lot of reading ideas off social media. So, but I think whatever's interests me at that time. Gosh, as we know, the algorithms figure out what you're interested in, and then they start shooting you information. That's been one positive of the algorithms, I would say, is I've gotten a lot of good reading ideas from social media. And then it just kind of builds on top of another, right? Other podcasts, what authors recommend or podcast hosts recommend or guests recommend. I'm very big into bookmarking that and making a little side list of items to read, and away we go. And I will say one of the things I've gotten better at over the years is if the book is no good, I'm happy to discard it and move on to the next one. I was very weak at that about a decade ago. I would kind of force myself to finish it. I found that took just a lot of time and energy to read something I'm not that interested in. So I've gotten better at that. I think that's a skill that you have to hone. At least it was for me, to just say no, on to the next, and away we go.
I totally agree with that last point. I was the same way, probably up until maybe 5 years ago, where I like had to read the book, or finish the book, I should say. And I found I actually read less because I'd get into a book that was sort of boring and I would just be like, set it down and not come back to it. And so I'd actually read less. And then somebody had shared the quote that it's the author's job to keep your attention. And so that was sort of freeing in a sense. So that's great. I totally agree with kind of your sentiment. One of the things that I'm super curious from your standpoint, just making that transition, we talked about the CFP profession, does a great job on the technical stuff, but falls way short on some of the EQ and psychology piece. Behavioral psychology, I know, is a huge passion of yours. And so one of the books I'm excited to dive in is called 4,000 Weeks, which you were kind enough to gift to me a few years ago. And I remember when you told me about the book, you just said it hit you like a ton of bricks, like it just totally reshaped your thinking. And so would love to hear from you just a little bit about the book, maybe what hit you so hard and how that shows up in your practice today.
Yeah. So 4,000 Weeks is a book that I found actually from a podcast. I can't give credit to the podcast at this moment, but I heard it on a podcast. I bought it at a time that was really, really impactful for me. The summer of 2023, my wife and I attended 2 funerals in the same month. That was August of 2023. I bought this book in September of 2023, read it, and then we attended another funeral in November of 2023. So 3 funerals in 3 months. Okay. And being a part of that and then reading this book around essentially the premise is, if everything goes well and you are very lucky and very healthy and you hit all the genetic markers, you have about 4,000 weeks to live on this earth. And choose your time wisely. By the time you're reading this, you may have 2,000 weeks left, something like that. And so reading that a month after attending a couple of funerals and then attending another funeral in that time period was just incredibly impactful for me, to really slow things down and just take stock in what's actually happening around you. At that time, I had 3 children. I now have 4 children. It was an incredible book and lesson in just how much time you actually have left as a human. And it can end at any moment. And what are you paying attention to, basically? That's the premise of the book. And so the way that you translate that into the practice and what I do for clients, my gosh, I don't know how often we talk about with my clients, by the time I meet with them, they might have 1,000 weeks left, 500 people left, 52 weeks left, right? We just don't know. And you've come to me, you've sought advice, you've accumulated all this money. Are we doing all the proper things with it, with what you're trying to accomplish? Are you paying attention to the right things? Are we spending everything that we've worked so hard to accumulate? Are we spending it in the right manner? Are we being good stewards? Are we spending your time with the right people? Are we spending the time we have left in the right way? That's been a big piece of this.
So I'm so curious, like with books, some of the great concepts, one of which you just talked about and how that translates into the advisory world. do you have a framework that you use? Do you reference that explicitly? Do you have like questions you pull out or quotes, or like how do you sort of like really tactically on a kind of a granular level translate? Or is it just really just a mindset and something you're mindful of as you have those conversations because time is limited?
It's much more of a mindset. I don't have a specific framework. I don't gift a copy of the book to everybody, although I've thought about that. I think that would be impactful in some ways. There are a couple of quotes that I will use with clients every now and then. It's not a specific, like, this is the time of the meeting where I give you the quote to make you think about this. It's never that structured, but it's really much more of a long-term conversation. When we do financial planning and we walk through net worth statements and we walk through analysis around spending and cash flow and all of it, a lot of the times we're giving clients really good news on just how well their plan is and how they're in good hands. And you're telling the client this, you've done so much good work over the years. You've accumulated money, you've saved money, you've paid down debt, you've put yourself in a wonderful position. Now let's think about what we need to be doing with this time that we have, how important this is. And that's when I'll use the framework of the book as just a more of a conversational piece. Try to just instill that mindset of, it's very easy to get distracted now that you maybe have left your job, your career, you've sold your business. These are the things that can distract you. This is the point of these distractions. Let's stay away from that because, we have a limited time left. Let's use this time wisely.
Yeah, it's one of the things that struck me in the book was it talked a lot about how, we live in a world of sort of infinite possibilities, right? You can send infinite emails, you can theoretically go to infinite places, but we are finite creatures. And sort of the book talks a little bit, if I recall correctly, just sort of coming to grips with that is that we can't do it all. And so by sort of accepting that, it can actually be freeing in a lot of ways. And you can sort of make peace with that and then really focus on what's important. Be curious in conversations with clients, like how do you sort of pull out and help them figure out what's important and really kind of align on what, ultimately they're after? And curious if you have any tips or suggestions for how you approach that.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations around time. And one of the things that I've learned throughout my career is just to ask clients, essentially, if you could make a portfolio of your time, what would that look like? 50% of your time. What do you want to be doing with 50% of your time? And, gardening or traveling or, what have you, whatever they say. All right, so what about 25% of your time? And what about the other 25% of your time? Or essentially, sometimes with the right clients, when they're really invested in it and we're really having this good conversation around time, we'll just on a notepad, I'll just draw a pie chart, map out what you want to do with your time. And then it's kind of an accountability piece, right? It's like you are telling me that this is what you want to be doing with your time. And I'm telling you, you have the resources and the funds and to do all of it. So now are you going to do that? And notice there, client A and client B, you allocated 0% to watching financial news or political news. Nobody carves out 10%. I want to watch 10% or 10% of my time. Nobody ever carves that out. So please don't, right? Like if you turn the news on in the morning, of course, I'm not going to hold you accountable to that, but let's not spend our time worrying about that. One of the reasons you hire me, you don't carve out 25% of your time to watch the markets. So let's not do that. That's our job. We'll handle that for you. That's been a really, really big conversational piece. And that a lot of that stemmed from this book is you have this time. It is finite. How are you going to spend it? And one of the big quotes that I will often talk to clients about or relay to clients is, so the ancient Greeks believed distractions. This is how they define distractions. And this is from the book. A systematic inner failure to use one's time on what one claimed to value the most. So if you claim to value these 4 or 5 things the most, then that's what you should be spending your time on. If you are not, then that is by definition a failure of your own system because you said these are the 5 things that are most important, but yet I spend 4 hours a day scrolling and I spend 3 hours a day watching news and I get all riled up over the things that that the world is distracting us with. But you claim that that's not what you want to be spending your, so let's steer back to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, it's sort of, I don't know the exact quote, but it's something to the effect of like, show me somebody's calendar and their credit card statement and I'll show you what they value. Yeah. It's really, I think, the concept. I love the quote. One of the other things that I know you had mentioned offline that you took away from the book is just this concept of the last time, right? There's sort of a last time, you'll pick up your kids, not in sort of a morbid way, right? They just get to a point where they're too big that you don't pick them up anymore. And so I'm just curious, like, how does that mentality show up, or just sort of using that behavioral psychology lens? I'm curious how you help clients think about sort of the finitude of life and just sort of the last time they'll do things. Again, not in a morbid way, but just being mindful that there's only 4,000 weeks, right, per the book.
Yeah, I wish I had just this incredibly scientific, measurable answer, but essentially it's just it's telling a lot of stories and having them tell me stories. It's one of the things I just love about this industry the most, is hearing stories from clients. I tell them my last time stories. I think we just had one, honestly, as like record this with you. So we have a baby who's 8 months old. She's just over 8 months. She used to nap on our chest a lot. That used to be a thing. It's like my favorite thing ever, a chest nap. It's like the grave. She's really not into that anymore. And she's getting a little too big. And, you know, she doesn't fit on our chest like she used to. And she might fall asleep for 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then she'll start nudging around and kicking you like, you know, like, you're not very comfortable, Dad. Like, what are we doing here? And so I think that we've hit that. I think that the last time that she ever napped on my chest was probably a week or two ago. And I don't think that'll ever happen again. And so we've hit a last time, and telling that story to clients and having them, because a lot of the clients I work with are so wise and they have been on this earth longer than I have. And they've had a lot of these last time moments. And so having conversations with them about this, I think, is the best way to just ensure that we're paying attention to it, because then it stirs up those memories of all the last times they've already experienced. And they are acutely aware that there's going to be more last time events. And it just forces them to be more aware of it and hopefully be more present when they leave my office, and know that they have the funds and the resources to do a lot of the things that they want to do, all the things they want to do in most cases. And just focus on that time allocation that you made for me in my office when I'm talking to them, because that's what we could do.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of makes me rethink a little bit financial planning software, right? I mean, it's just so numeric. It's sort of sterile in a lot of ways. It's not very like human centric, right? And I think with the concept of 4,000 weeks and sort of last time, I don't know, that just feels like there's maybe like a way that the world, or the industry, I should say, could re-envision financial planning software with more of a behavioral psychology lens. I'd be just curious on your reaction to that as you think about some of the tools that we have and maybe how that does or doesn't kind of map to some of the stuff we're talking about.
It's a conversation at every firm's strategic meeting across the country. I am positive that is, yes, we do need the retirement analysis. Yes, we do need the net worth statement. Yes. We do need the cash flow understanding. Yes. We do need to show and make sure that we're all on the same page with our investment allocations. Yes. But if you come into my office and all we have discussed is cash flow analysis, net worth, investment allocation, and then I walk you out, I mean, I have failed miserably as an advisor, in my opinion. That is table stakes. That is just part of what is expected when you hire us. But are we helping you with that time? And if there was a way to output a time allocation, I would love that. But I agree, it's that I think is what sets us apart. Not being too forward looking, but as AI begins to take over I don't know if the world is the right way to say it, but as AI begins to infiltrate a little bit more, what's going to set us apart from a robot? I'm going to have conversations with you about your time, and we're going to hold each other accountable, and we're going to tell each other stories about our time and make sure we're all on the same page with how we're spending our time. I don't think that robot is going to do that. That's a really, really big piece of what we're trying to communicate. The more we can show that to clients and get them to understand it and buy in, the better.
Yeah, it does seem there's obviously a ton of discussion in the industry right now just about how AI will reshape things, both for, the positive, hopefully, and the negative. But what I think I'm hearing you say is that really the behavioral psychology piece and how do we show up and empathize and frankly just be more human is hopefully the way that we continue to differentiate. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we wrap there, I know there's one other book that you and I both read. I think we actually maybe read it at the same time, called The Go-Giver. I think it's written by Bob Burke. For those that haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's a fairly short read, but just curious how that book has kind of showed up in your life, both as an advisor and maybe even just as a person, because I know that's a pretty profound book, although the concept is pretty simple.
So this might be the book I've gifted the most in my life. I read The Go-Giver and we read it probably 2019 or 2020.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So, we're at 6 to 7 years of history with that book. And I personally believe it to be the greatest fable of all time, if you could call it a fable. It is a very quick read. You could read it in a weekend if you're really interested in it. But essentially, it's a fable or a tale surrounding the idea that the more you give, the more you will receive. It tells the story of a young man who is just a taker. He's trying to take advantage of people. He's trying to sell things. He's just out there trying to take his. And he essentially meets a mentor or a guru of some kind who teaches him how to give. And the more you give, you give time, you give attention, you give love, you give compassion. If you give that, you will end up receiving more than you can ever take. And, obviously the young man learns the lesson and his life changes, et cetera, et cetera. But it's presented in such an incredible way that it makes so much sense. And I think especially in the industry that we're in, we have to be givers. We have to give time to our clients. We have to give advice to our clients. And we sign up for that. And that's what we want to do. And I have found absolutely, positively, just like with reading, the more I read, the better my life ends up going. The more I give, the better my life ends up going. I've noticed that in spades. It's been a consistent theme forever. The second I get into a take mindset for whatever reason, things just don't go as well for me. When I read The Go-Giver, that fundamentally shifted the way I view every single personal interaction I've ever had as just how can I give to this person, make their life a little better, whether it's give them advice, give them a financial plan, like what is it I can give them? And everything in your life begins to improve.
I remember vividly reading that, and it was kind of a cool, I think it was like a marketing effort we had done organizationally. We were giving it to clients and really just sort of promoting the concept of giving and the benefits. But I even think about in the sales process for advisors, like the idea of just giving a ton of value, right? Because like some people are going to take that and they're going to go their separate way and DIY, and other people are going to go, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. I don't know that I can do this entirely on my own. And so I think the concept in that light is pretty profound too, because either way you're helping people. And I think that's a big driver of why people get into the business. Well, as we look to wrap up here, I wanted to wrap with kind of a lightning round. I think this will be sort of fun, but I've got 4 or 5 questions. I want to just ping you on and just get your thoughts as it relates to reading. And so I'll just start from the top. But in terms of your reading habits, are you a hard copy, Kindle, or audiobook guy?
I am a hard copy guy. My wife has a Kindle. I don't know how she does it. The audio stuff, I prefer podcasts. Books, I prefer hard copy.
So hard copy guys. So do you dog ear, highlight, write in the margins? Do you leave them untouched? How do you take notes?
I highlight or write in margins or on page. I don't mind coloring the book in any capacity. So I don't dog ear. I don't do that, but I'll just highlight and write.
Okay. Love it. Favorite place to read? That's
a good question. I will read in bed. I will read in our recliner downstairs. I will read in my office. Favorite place? Gosh, I don't know. I have like basically 3 places I do read. I don't know what my favorite is, but I have 3 places I read: office, downstairs, in a recliner, or in bed.
That's awesome. Mine's up at our cabin overlooking Lake Superior. Oh, yeah. Peaceful. So are you a reread favorites or move on kind of guy? I feel like this is one that divides people, and I actually don't know where you're going to go with this. So super excited.
I will definitely reread favorites, yes, but not every book qualifies for that. I thought The Hobbit was a great tale, really, really great tale. I'll never reread The Hobbit. I can promise you that.
It's like 800 pages, isn't it?
No, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Hobbit's a shorter read, but I will never read that again. Great tale. I'll never read again. I've read 4,000 Weeks twice, Go-Giver more than once. So, but I will certainly reread. Yeah.
Last one. What are you reading now?
I have a book at home called What to Make of a Life by Jim Collins. I'm early into that one, but that has been very, very good. I'm a big Jim Collins fan. And essentially, that is from what I can gather, that is a book on how life can throw you cliffs. That's kind of the makeup of it. And everybody's going to fall off a cliff at some point in their life. How do you get up from that cliff? And he tells, he has a lot of case studies on real life, not just tales, but real life people, real life cliffs, what they went through, how they responded. It's been very interesting.
You were kind enough to gift me the book, but one of the other things in the book was this idea of encodings, like we're sort of encoded to do things in life. And you were certainly, is your mentor so aptly spotted and coded to be an advisor and a leader. And so, Thomas, thank you so much for being one of the first guests on the Advisor Library podcast. For the guests that want to get in touch with you, where can they find you and Boulay Wealth?
LinkedIn is probably the best. Thomas Pargett, Pargett on LinkedIn at Boulay Wealth. And then our website, Boulay Wealth, is the best way to find where we are. We serve clients all over the country. We are headquartered in the Minneapolis area, and I have our office in Omaha, Nebraska here. And LinkedIn and our website would be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks to our listeners, and look forward to be back on the podcast here soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the Advisor Library. For book reviews, episode notes, and our newsletter, visit advisorslibrary.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a conversation. Books change leaders. Leaders change firms.